Hello and welcome to episode 204 of the Sasuga podcast. In this episode, I'm sharing some lessons from a recent roundtable event for women in business at the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Tokyo. Ready? Here we go. You're listening to the Sasuga podcast, and you're about to discover how to excel in your work without being exhausted through practical techniques that you can start using right now. I'm your host, Helen Iwata, a bilingual Brit with a 3-decade career in Tokyo. I'm an award-winning women's success and business communication coach, speaker, writer, wife, and mother. Every week here on the show, I share my personal stories and favorite techniques around the 4 phases of the Sasuga success cycle, around self-care, planning, communication, and productivity to help you enjoy more success and less stress. You'll also have the chance to listen in on heartfelt and eye-opening conversations with inspiring guests and hear answers to your questions to help you use your expertise, time, and energy better, and quite simply to bring more joy into your work and life. This is the Sasuga podcast. Hello, lovely listener. How are you doing? As this episode is released, I will be back in the UK for an early Christmas celebration with my family. The last few weeks have been rather full as I focused on wrapping up my corporate workshops and coaching, online programs, and speaking events to be able to take extra time to rest and refresh. December always used to be a time of running around, as the saying goes, like a chicken with its head cut off. Or a less graphic image is the characters in the old Japanese word for December, shiwasu, the monk or the teacher running around. And ironically, this running around and tremendous stress came from wanting things to be perfect for other people around Christmas time. But of course, it actually took away from the joy of the festive season. Learning to let go of perfectionism and slow down, not just at year end, but all of the time, has been one of the most important lessons I've learned as a woman in business. And today I want to share with you 3 more lessons. And they're inspired by the other day when I was invited to speak on a round table at the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Tokyo. This was the final event for the Women in Business program, which is a collaboration between the Chamber and Globis. I had the honor of sitting alongside Jun Miyachi, the program ambassador and president of Cartier Japan, and Tomoko Kusuda from L'Oréal, with the moderator Chizu Sasaki from Dale Carnegie Japan. And much as I would love to share with you everything from our candid conversation and the answers to the audience's questions, this was, of course, an exclusive event, so I'm sharing just a few of the most important lessons that I've learned to be successful as a woman in business in Japan, and these are also what I shared with the participants on that day. So, in this episode of the Sasuga podcast, you will hear the importance of knowing when to say yes and when to say no, how to build your skills by stepping out of your comfort zone, and how to deal with mistakes and keep your team motivated. And just before we get into that, I want to express my deep appreciation to Charles Kokorian and Justine Kozak from the French Embassy and Yuki Tadokoro from Globis for inviting me to speak at this super inspiring event. Okay, so first, lesson 1, the importance of knowing when to say yes and when to say no. A huge strength for me in the past was that I always said yes. I was talking with a former McKinsey consultant at an alumni gathering a few years ago, and she said to me, "What I remember about working with you, Helen, was that you always said yes. Even when I asked you for something really challenging, you had an attitude of, はい、やってみる." And saying yes often it's great early in your career. This exposes you to more experiences and usually helps to build relationships. But there's a problem. What was initially a strength can become a weakness. And depending on where you are in your career, you may already recognize this. When you keep saying yes, people ask more and more of you. And you only have a limited amount of time and energy each day, right? If you're saying yes to one thing, you are saying no to something else. And for many, that something else is often your well-being. So, ideally, before you start to notice that tipping point, begin to say no. If you find it difficult to say no, you are not alone. And you might find it useful to listen to episode 193 of the Sasuga podcast, where I share 2 ways to say no without saying no. Okay, so that was lesson 1. Say yes early in your career, and then be more selective and start to say no later in your career when you've already developed your expertise and are in high demand. Okay, lesson number 2, how to build your skills by stepping out of your comfort zone. And this is a story that I often share. You may have heard it before. I'm going to share it again because it is so valuable. When I first joined McKinsey, I felt like I was surrounded by so many amazing people, and I hesitated to speak up in meetings because I was worried what the consultants and experts would think of me. What if what I said didn't sound intelligent enough? What if I said the wrong thing? Maybe you can relate. But I soon realized that if I didn't speak up, I couldn't make a contribution and I couldn't be evaluated. So I started with small meetings and I forced myself to say something. And that was a big step out of my comfort zone, but it was okay. And after doing that a few times in gradually bigger meetings with more stakeholders, more important stakeholders, I noticed my comfort zone started to expand. And I spoke up in bigger and bigger meetings. Not only did my comfort zone continue to expand, but my confidence grew. Confidence comes from competence, from being able to do something. And being able to do something comes from practice. So by practicing speaking up, I became more confident. And eventually, one day at an all-company gathering, my boss just handed me the mic without warning, and he said, "I'm sure Helen has something to say." Well, yeah, I basically just took the mic and spoke quite confidently. My former self would easily have freaked out and been lost for words. But over the years, I had been intentionally and consistently developing my mindset, skills, and habits to transform into a better communicator and leader. So, in that moment, I realized I had come such a long way. So the next time you're telling yourself that you're not good enough at something, like many women in business do, simply recognize where you are and start taking action to improve. Practice. Practice and you will get better. Remember my story, take small and consistent steps out of your comfort zone. Okay, we are about halfway through this episode and I wanted to let you know that as of recording, we're accepting applications for the next Sasuga VIP Women's Coaching Program. In case you haven't heard of it before, the Sasuga VIP Women's Coaching Program is my signature 3-month online group program for professional women in Japan and beyond to discover how to optimize their time, energy, and expertise to enjoy more success and less stress. And this life-changing program is unique because it's founded on the Sasuga success cycle and the counterintuitive combination of vital self-care with high-impact professional skills development. Typical results that participants enjoy are more confidence, stronger communication skills, especially in English, clarity about what's important for the future, greater job satisfaction, ability to focus on priorities, finally feeling at ease with work-life balance, and making self-care a habit even with a busy schedule. So if this sounds like exactly what you need right now, pause this episode and hop on over to sasugacommunications.com/VIP before you forget or get busy with something else. And don't worry, I'll be waiting here for you. Okay, I waited. Let's get back into this episode. So, lesson 3, how to deal with mistakes and keep your team motivated. Everybody makes mistakes. In episode 103 of the Sasuga podcast, I spoke about when your colleague makes mistakes. Let me now, though, take you back to the early days of my career in Japan when I was working at Yokohama City Hall. Did you know I worked at Yokohama City Hall? I had to send a fax. Yes, this was rather a long time ago, and using a fax machine was quite new to me. Instead of sending the fax to one of the ward officers, I accidentally sent it to all of them. And I think there were around 16 ward officers at the time. And it wasn't as if I could just send a quick email apology because we didn't have email in those days. I was absolutely horrified about what I'd done, but my boss was very understanding and actually seemed to be a bit amused. And since then, in all the years that I've been managing teams, I've never been angry with colleagues who made a mistake. I've never played that blame game or whose fault is this? I believe that when someone makes a mistake, they already feel bad enough about it and are highly unlikely to do the thing intentionally again. So why would I make them feel even worse? This has always worked well to resolve issues quickly in my teams and to keep my teams motivated. I would add, though, just to make sure I'm not being misunderstood here, if someone is consistently underperforming, that's a separate issue. But I'm not going to get into that now on this episode because it's time to start wrapping up. Okay, today we talked about the importance of knowing when to say yes and when to say no, how to build your skills by stepping out of your comfort zone, and how to deal with mistakes and keep your team motivated. So, what was most meaningful for you in this episode of the Sasuga podcast? I would love to read your comments on any of my social media posts. I'm on Instagram at Helen Iwata or LinkedIn as Helen Iwata. And it's great. I'm seeing so much more interaction on LinkedIn. Absolutely loving it. You can find today's show notes at sasugacommunications.com/204. Of course, with a link to find out more about the Sasuga VIP Women's Coaching Program, as well as suggestions for further listening on related topics. Thank you so much for listening. I always appreciate you being there. Make it a brilliant, lessons learned, and joyful day. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sasuga podcast. Wow, the fact that you listened all the way to the end here tells me how committed you are to your personal and professional development. If you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to tell your friends or colleagues about the Sasuga podcast. Spread the tips and the joy. Help to make everybody's lives better. And you may even like to rate and review the Sasuga podcast in your favorite podcast player to help others find it. And if you'd like to hear more from me, be sure you're regularly reading my free weekly newsletter, Sasuga Tips for You. I'll send you practical techniques, resources, and inspiration every Tuesday in English and Japanese. Just go to sasugacommunications.com/subscribe to subscribe. And I look forward to supporting you.